What is up, guys? Wrestling Premier is here. Now, where do I even start with this one? There's a lot of reasons why ECW failed. Some have to do with Vince, some have to do with the talent themselves. There was a lot of factors as to why this relaunch failed. In this video, I cover the entire WWE ECW run. The bad, the good, and everything in between, so don't think this is just a video on why ECW failed. It's a retrospective on WWE's third brand from 2006 to 2010. So for me to talk about this one, we gotta go back to November 16, 2004. Why that day? Well, that was the day WWE released the Rise and Fall of ECW DVD. Personally, I loved this DVD, and as you may know, I didn't get the chance to watch the original ECW, and for some reason in 2006, I randomly bought a bundle that featured the ECW One Night Stand 2005 DVD and this. I watched both of these DVDs a million times. I broke all 3 or 4 discs that they contained. I believe there was 3 discs, I'm not sure. I still don't get why I bought this bundle. Maybe it's because I witnessed the Foley and Edge hardcore match and I thought ECW, I don't know. But young me loved these DVDs. Anyways, that documentary was one of WWE's best, and in my opinion, it's one of my favorites with the Bret Hart and Edge ones. It was very insightful, and I learned a lot about ECW. The DVD sold very well, and due to that, there was discussion over a ECW reunion show. Apparently, it was Rob Van Dam's idea to hold a ECW reunion show. Here's what he had to say in an interview back in 2014, and I quote, "It was my idea actually to do the ECW pay-per-view, and that process involved me going back and forth to Vince every day for a while with different ideas. Look, you've got all these wrestlers on your payroll, but they used to be in ECW. Let us do a reunion show. It'd be awesome. You got Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Chris Benoit, Spike Dudley." I give him this big list and he goes, "I didn't realize that." I said, "You don't have to bring anybody in, just let us do what we want to do one night, the way we want to do it," and he went for it, and it happened obviously. And there it is. Mr. Monday Night, whatever night he calls himself right now, ignited the fire that led to ECW One Night Stand. Joey Styles said that the reason why ECW wasn't called One Last Stand was because they were planning on making a second event in 2006. Anyways, the show happened on June 12, 2005, and it was a massive success. It was a spectacular event. It was a great way to commemorate ECW, and it was perfect. Chris Jericho became Lionheart once again. RVD cut a pretty good promo. Paul Heyman was there, and he showed a hell of a lot of emotion in that passionate promo. I mean, sure, Eddie Guerrero was pissed and JBL was drunk, although some stuff he did was funny, like that commentary that he did on the DVD. But other than that, it was a historical night, and it remains one of the greatest pay-per-views in WWE history. Raven was supposed to be there, but TNA at the last minute refused to allow him to participate, and I heard a rumor that New Jack had some assault charges. I'm not sure. I think that's for 2006, though. Anyways, this pay-per-view had a buy rate of 340,000. It was the second highest for a B-level pay-per-view in 2005, and number 1 was Vengeance 2005 that featured the Hell in a Cell match between Batista and Triple H. From there, the ball was rolling. Shane McMahon, Tommy Dreamer, and Paul Heyman discussed bringing back ECW as a show on WWE.com like Velocity. In WWE Untold from a year ago, Paul Heyman discussed this, and I quote, "At the end of 2005, it was Shane McMahon that came to me, and Shane had the concept of an online-only presentation, which is pretty forward-thinking now that you think about it, because that's what streaming is. Shane McMahon explained why he wanted it to be an internet-exclusive pay-per-view. The reason we wanted to go digital is because you're allowed far more freedoms from a digital standpoint than you are from a network standpoint, and it would have done 2 things. One, it would have kept the ECW moniker and brand a little more edge, and from a business standpoint, you're also getting into where people want to watch on their own time. But as time went on, networks were interested in ECW, so what did that mean? It meant that the genetic jackhammer was in charge of this new project." Heyman revealed this once again on Untold. As this evolved, there had become interest from networks to actually carry this product, which of course took it out of Shane's hands and placed it on Vince's hands. And since Vince understood that there was serious profits to be made, it was completely taken out of Shane's hands, and Vince wanted to maximize this new third brand of WWE's as much as he could. And in order to maximize that concept, it had to stop bringing the authentic ECW feel. It had to become a third brand under the umbrella of World Wrestling Entertainment. Also, Heyman had this to say in a 2012 interview, I believe. Mr. McMahon had a meeting with the heads of every department and announced that WWE was going for 3 brands, Raw, SmackDown, and ECW. He made his intentions known that he fully expected every department to offer its resources and create a third global brand for WWE. He got up, announced that Shane was going to run the division, and that I was not just the on-air, but the behind-the-scenes brand manager. Then he left the room. Also Heyman. The moment Sci-Fi was willing to pay a license fee for this program, I knew he had to adhere to certain philosophies that would negate the effectiveness of telling people that we are the alternative to WWE. WWE had the obligation to present to the public a certain level of production value, shot a certain way, with a style that was identifiable as WWE's. We were dead before we were even born. After the WWE vs. ECW special, which I'm looking to cover in a few months, and ECW One Night Stand, which saw RVD capture the WWE Championship in an epic, and I mean epic encounter against John Cena, Extreme Championship Wrestling, for the first time in 6 years, returned to television. The network that aired the program was Sci-Fi. Now, this was a newer version of ECW. There was Kurt Angle, RVD was champion, there was new blood. It kind of resembled the old ECW in a small way, but it was mostly different. Now, if you were thinking that this was anything like the original ECW, you were wrong. The show's first episode started off with Sandman caning a zombie. They were originally going to have Sandman destroy an alien, but for some reasons, they chose a zombie. And that Russian leg sweep was anything but pleasant. Later that night, Kelly debuted. In an interview with Chris Van Vliet, Kelly, or Barbie, told the story of her first night on the new ECW. And I quote, "The funny thing is I go on and we're on live television. My first night, we rehearsed hours with this chair. The prop is the chair. I walk on the stage and there's no chair. I stood there for a few seconds and I was like, I guess I'm gonna have to just dance. I get to the back and Vince is like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, but you did so good. You took it on the fly." I had to add this. Like, I was working on this video and I thought McMahon dancing with the chair, like, it's hilarious. This is the same guy that did the HBK zipline thing, so anything's possible with him. Anyways, Kelly danced nearly every week, and her jealous boyfriend, Mike Knox, put a stop to it every single time. Obviously, Mike Knox was booed for this. Meanwhile, ECW's first show drew a 2.7 rating, and it was seen as a success. The rating was a success, not the show, because I believe Paul Heyman and many of the ECW originals were frustrated with how the show went. Now, the ECW originals were originally signed to the roster, and slowly they began disappearing. Everything for the new ECW was going normal until Sabu and Rob Van Dam were arrested for possession of marijuana and pills, and this completely destroyed Van Dam's push, although he didn't really care. They punished Van Dam by taking away both titles, and it was Big Show who won the gold. The ECW fans trashed the ring, showing their frustrations with the result of the match, and once Big Show won the title, it was like this thing wasn't going to work out. Now, about Big Show's title reign, I thought it was underrated. Yeah, sure, they should have made an ECW original a champ, but Big Show was a dominating 80s heel, and it made for some entertaining bouts, although it didn't feel like the original ECW. He fought against the likes of Ric Flair, who bled and bled and bled, The Undertaker, and DX. Overall, he had a great run, and the only problem with this was it was ECW. I believe if this happened on Raw or SmackDown, then it'd be mentioned much more. Other than the name, it was decent. One match in particular, though, it sums up WWE's version of the brand. On the August 1st, 2006 episode of ECW, Big Show faced Batista in the main event. In the Hammerstein Ballroom, the fans shouted, "Change the channel," showing their disdain for this main event. In a very recent interview on WWE After the Bell, link is in the description by the way, the Big Show discussed his time in the land of extreme. And I quote, "I think there was a big disconnect that WWE had with the ECW fans. I remember going to the live event shows, and the merchandise that they were selling at the ECW shows was, Undertaker, Triple H. Like, these people didn't buy a ticket to see these guys. They came to see Tommy Dreamer, you know what I mean? I had to earn a lot of respect from the ECW fans, and it took a lot for me because when I had that match with Dave at the Hammerstein Ballroom, Batista and I gave them a hell of a match, but we weren't what they wanted to see. They didn't give a crap. They may have liked Dave Batista. They may have liked the Big Show. Independently, though. But not for their ECW. They wanted the guys that they identified with and that they were emotionally invested in. And that was the difference. And it took a while to get emotionally invested with the ECW audience till they realized, the Big Show's not such a bad guy. We'll cut him a break. But it took me a while of not letting that get to me and just going out every night and trying to do the best that I could every night. Working with guys like Sabu, who was such an amazing lunatic. Nonetheless, Big Show was a good placeholder for Bobby Lashley. While WWE was struggling to retain the original ECW's identity, like disqualifying competitors, which is something that the original ECW didn't do, they also used the brand as a launching pad for many superstars. Kevin Thorne was originally going to be paired with Gangrel and Ariel to form the New Brood, and to be honest, I think this would have been awesome because Gangrel was already familiar to the audience, and it could have helped Ariel and Thorne. And another guy debuted on the brand, I think you may know him, his name was CM Punk. I don't need to explain his character because you already know. He debuted on the same night that Batista and Big Show literally tore the house down. He made just incredible tap out to the Anaconda voice to a respectful crowd, at least to him. Now that we've talked about how ECW was a place for talent to debut and learn the ins and outs of main roster WWE, we gotta discuss December to Dismember. Oh no. At this point, Paul Heyman and Vince were butting heads. This pay-per-view was just the tip of the iceberg, that's all. If it wasn't going to happen on this night, then it was going to happen eventually. They disagreed on the main event result. Heyman wanted to crown CM Punk the new champion, while Vince was looking to crown Lashley as the new champion. Paul Heyman discussed this in an interview with The Sun back in 2008, and I quote, I thought the undercard was horrible. I thought that the design of the show itself made no sense. I just felt like the entire layout of the show, the entire complexion of the event was a downer. I also thought we were doing Bobby Lashley no favors the way he was going to win the title. Lashley winning the title, especially if you eliminate Rob Van Dam and CM Punk early, would be leapfrogging over RVD and Punk. Van Dam was the sentimental favorite, Punk was the kid that all the crowd was getting behind and they wanted to see the upset. If you don't appease the need for the audience to see that new hero get crowned like Punk did the week before at Survivor Series when DX let him say, "Are you ready?" then the audience will feel ripped off. If you don't put that spotlight on Van Dam, with whom the paying customers have just taken this long ride back into the title chase, then the paying customer will feel ripped off. My opinion was to start the chamber off with the Big Show saying, "I'm a 7-foot tall, 500-pound giant. I'm gonna mow through every one of you." And the first to take him on would be Punk. Playing to the fact that UFC is so hot and in the public consciousness, Punk chokes out Big Show in the first round of the Elimination Chamber. 4.5 minutes in, and now the champion is out. You know for a fact before any two contenders lock up, I am getting a new champion at the end of this night. Then the first guy to come out after Big Show versus Punk would be Van Dam. You let Van Dam and Punk fight it out, and then you start feeding in the heels. Vince hated this, and he especially hated the fact that Big Show liked it. Damn. Once again, this is what Paul Heyman had to say on the plane ride with Vince. "It was time for me to go. I had lost my passion and my purpose in the industry. We had resurrected the ECW brand, and that was very personal to me, and I didn't like the way it was going. It became a very personal fight between me and Vince. I had offered many times to write SmackDown again and give someone else the ECW brand, so maybe you'll feel less compelled to change the show on someone else other than me. It was the old cowboy thing. This town ain't big enough for the both of us, and Vince ain't going to be the one leaving." Heyman cut an emotional promo after the show announcing that Big Show's invoking his rematch clause for that week's SmackDown, and it ended up being Paul Heyman's final appearance in WWE for about 5 years. If you want the full story, I made this video about 4 months ago. You could go check it out. I made it the day of December to Dismember, and I think it's decent. Anyways, Big Show lost that match, and this marked his final appearance. He was extremely burnt out, and he definitely deserved a hiatus. His WWE contract expired on February 7, 2007, and he was gone for a year. Now, if you think about it, ECW at this point was a failure. Kurt Angle left the company, RVD got busted, Big Show was burnt out, and most importantly, Heyman was gone. So how did they right the ship? Dusty Rhodes became the booker, and things felt a bit different. Most of the ECW originals they signed at the beginning were starting to disappear. The Kelly expose turned into the Extreme expose with Brooke Adams and Layla, and the new breed began to emerge. On the January 30th episode of ECW, Mr. McMahon visited the brand and he praised guys such as Marcus Corvan, and he trashed the ECW originals. The new talent such as Corvan, Elijah Burke, Matt Striker, Kevin Thorne, and Ariel were collectively known as the New Breed. They feuded with the ECW originals, and this feud made its way to WrestleMania, where the originals emerged victorious. Now, for some reason though, following WrestleMania, both teams wanted CM Punk. I don't even know why, but for some reason they saw something in him, and they wanted him to join their group. On the April 10th episode of ECW, CM Punk made his decision. After teasing a fight, Punk hugged Burke and he joined the New Breed. Punk's time in the group was very short. He was rude to the other members, he was trying to take Burke's leadership position, and he didn't help Burke in his matchup against RVD. He was basically ruining the whole thing. The following week he apologized, but once again he acted like a leader, and in the end he just decided to kick Burke in the back of his head and cost him an elimination match. Right after that, Punk GTS'd him and apologized to him. Now, following this, the group was basically destroyed. Kevin Thorne left the group, and they quietly disbanded afterwards. To some, this was seen as a way to just build CM Punk, and that's exactly what happened, because who came out of this better than they previously were? CM Punk, that's all. Did Corvan do something? No. Did Matt Striker do something? No. It was CM Punk who came out of this better off. Meanwhile, the ECW Championship was held by Mr. McMahon. He won the title at Backlash, and he sported a do-rag. Like, does he have waves under there or what? Now, personally, I thought this was funny. He did this on purpose to have the fans boom. That's exactly what happened. It was disrespectful to ECW, but that's exactly what he was doing. It wasn't like it wasn't already destroyed. Like, December to Dismember proved that ECW was done. Plus, he was going to drop the title later on. The ECW originals showed disdain towards McMahon, and they confronted him on the May 1st episode. Now, Vince challenged the ECW originals to a fight, but then he backtracked and made the originals face off against each other with the winner facing him next week. RVD won with a title match turned into a handicap match including Umaga and Shane O'Mac. RVD obviously lost, and eventually Bobby Lashley won the title and McMahon went crazy. Now, I kid you not, I just learned that he sat on a rocking chair the entire episode of ECW. I just learned this today, I'm not joking. And this led to the limo explosion. Like, what could have been? That probably needs to be a separate video in which we cover Vince's 2007 run. Anyways, the 2007 draft saw ECW lose Bobby Lashley and gain Chris Benoit. As you may know, CM Punk was set to face Chris Benoit at Vengeance Night of Champions, and it seemed like these two were going to tear the house down. I will go full in depth on that pay-per-view in June hopefully, but for right now let's talk about the ECW Championship. Since Benoit wasn't in Houston, he was replaced by Johnny Nitro. They had the match and it was Nitro who emerged victorious to become the new ECW Champion. Following this, McMahon made a statement on that week's ECW saying that there will be no mention of Benoit's name, and John Cena appeared on the show to help the fans forget about that tragedy and all that stuff. He faced Nitro in the main event and it was the beginning of a new era. From there, the ECW champion continued to feud with CM Punk. On the July 17, 2007 episode of ECW, Johnny Nitro changed his name to John Morrison. He changed his look completely, and Morrison explained why they changed his name like a million times from 2004 to 2007. And I quote, "Just classic wrestling stuff. People are wishy-washy. Honestly, it was because I wanted to be Johnny Blaze. Johnny Blaze was my character at OVW. I had all these fancy fire catchphrases. Call the fire department, get your fire extinguishers out, ladies. By the time you hear the thunder, it's going to be too late because the lightning will have already struck. That was all my thing. Then I debuted as Johnny Blaze, and WWE promptly received a cease and desist from Marvel, who had copyrighted the name Johnny Blaze for Ghost Rider. It switched then to Johnny Spade, which is basically a ripoff of Johnny Ace. A week later, it was changed to Johnny Nitro, mostly because I really did not like Johnny Spade. Johnny Nitro was a homage to Eric Bischoff, who I was his apprentice at the time. I liked that name. Then basically, Vince McMahon thought that Nitro reminded him of WCW, and when I became the ECW champion, he a couple of times mentioned to me, if you're going to be a real star, you need a real name. Just one day he was all, you've got to change your name. So I made a list of names that day, mostly movie star names. John Brando Morrison, Dean Brando Morrison, Brando. Anyways, a whole bunch of weird things. I had a couple Johnny Hollywood type things in there too. They just eventually settled on John Morrison because they liked my look as compared to Jim Morrison. It's what they went with, and it's what I'm known as now. Anyways, Morrison and Punk had a series of matches that Punk himself disliked. Now, I didn't watch all of them, but I just recently watched the Last Chance match from September. That match was so damn entertaining, the crowd was into it, and CM Punk emerged victorious. They tore the house down, and it was definitely one of the best WWE ECW matches ever. I believe Morrison was suspended after this matchup, though. While these two were feuding with one another, The Miz began to make a name for himself. He proclaimed himself the Chick Magnet, and all of a sudden he won Tag Team Gold with the Tuesday Night Delight. He worked his way up, from getting kicked out of the locker room by Benoit to becoming a champion in WWE. Awesome. Now, around this time period, ECW started to become good. The only thing, once again, for the millionth time, that was hurting it was its name. Stars began to develop and make names for themselves, and it provided an opportunity for guys who may not have the chance to shine on Raw or SmackDown. Shelton Benjamin became the gold standard in ECW. Once he went to SmackDown, he became US champion. CM Punk in ECW was heavily pushed, and by the time he made it to Raw, he cashed in a briefcase. So what this proved to me was that ECW did make stars for Raw and SmackDown. And not to mention how it helped Mark Henry, Chavo Guerrero, and Matt Hardy's careers for a bit. Sure, it may have been a weaker title for them to hold, but the show in general is good to great with these guys as champion. ECW continued to evolve into the beta version of NXT, and by late 2008, it was just that. NXT, but it was called ECW. A massive influx of talent debuted on the show. Guys such as Kofi Kingston, Evan Bourne, Jack Swagger, and DJ Gabriel emerged. Yes, one doesn't sound like the other, but you get what I mean. Kofi Kingston captured the IC title, and Swagger even captured the ECW championship from Matt Hardy. So stars were made. There was Armando Estrada as GM, and he was pretty entertaining. Colin Delaney was getting his ass kicked on a weekly basis, and the show was basically a gem. The Miz and Morrison were the standout guys. They messed around on the dirt sheet and made for some entertaining moments. Oh, and don't even get me started on Evan Bourne. He was awesome. At that point, I didn't see anyone like him bar Rey Mysterio. Like that shooting star press, man. We were wishing for that matchup between Bourne and Rey. By February 2009, ECW, bar the name, was entertaining. Yeah, sure, they lacked in star power, but stars were groomed for Raw and SmackDown. Now, this time period is my favorite from ECW. Why? Well, Captain Charisma finally returned. He was initially going to be involved in the Hardy debacle, but it was leaked, and instead he was moved to ECW. Unfortunately, though, Todd Grisham didn't really capture the moment well. He's saying, it's Christian. Striker tried to save the moment, but Grisham kind of ruined it. Nonetheless, I still like this return. Personally, I started to watch ECW a lot more around here, and Christian went out to become the face of the show, and he carried the brand on his back. Sure, the other guys had some moments, but it was ultimately Captain Charisma's show, and he proved that he could have great title reigns as the focal point of a show. Anyways, there was this one moment in particular that I really liked from 2009. Tommy Dreamer capturing the ECW Championship. Heading into the pay-per-view, Tommy Dreamer was set to leave the company the day of Extreme Rules. He wasn't initially going to win the title, but after renewing his deal with Vince for a few more months, Dreamer ended up winning the title for a second time in his career. His first title reign barely counts because it lasted for a day, so it made for a pretty good moment to see Dreamer win the title for a second time. I know it wasn't actually the ECW Championship of old, but still, I liked this moment. I thought it was an awesome moment to witness Dreamer winning the title he was pursuing for several years. Christian would recapture the title on Night of Champions, and from there he faced the likes of William Regal, Zack Ryder, and Chris Jericho at one point visited ECW. Captain Charisma beat him clean. Before I talk about the final episode of ECW, let me mention the Abraham Washington show. AEW was rambling on while Tony Atlas was laughing. Do you guys remember that? I just wanted to mention it because I completely forgot about it too. On the February 2nd, 2010 episode of ECW, Mr. McMahon addressed the future of the show. He announced that in 3 weeks' time, ECW will be going off the air for another show. It was later revealed to be a show called NXT. On the February 16th episode of ECW, which was the final one, Christian faced Ezekiel Jackson in an Extreme Rules match in the main event. That match ended with Jackson victorious, and he became the final ECW champion. And if only Christian invoked the rematch clause that instance. Personally, I thought he should have been the final champion. Why? Well, he made the brand fun despite the name. He made me want to tune in and watch the show every week, and for that, he deserved to end the show as champion. I mean, what did Ezekiel Jackson do after this? That's it for this video. I have an indirect sequel. It's about NXT. You should go check it out. I believe you might have checked it out because it's one of my most viewed videos. And personally, I thought NXT was a great way to follow ECW despite the competition and all that stuff. I may have to cover the first episode of NXT in the future, but for right now, you can go check out the rise and fall and rise of NXT. And that's it for this video. Make sure you hit a 5-star frog splash on the like button and perhaps the kill switch on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.